Welcome to the Marvel Champions podcast, a podcast about Marvel Champions, the card game. I'm your host, Scott, and with me, as always, is my co host, Ryan.
Howdy, it's good to be here.
All right, Ryan, if you've been living under a rock, you would know that there has been after a long, long hiatus, a new expansion box that's been revealed.
Yes, and I will have to say, no one's going to believe us, but we actually surprisingly predicted this pretty close.
Yeah, we were throwing out some ideas and thought what would a Mr. Sinister box look like based off the little kind of teaser from the end of the spoiler alert, end of Mutant Genesis.
Whoops.
and and thinking about like he could use and who are kind of some of his henchmen, kind of people associated with him. And I would say that we got a few things right.
Yeah, I know we talked about possibly have like a Morlock scenario. Um, and just some other random ones. I think we both mutually agreed that there wasn't going to be Apocalypse on this one. That's going to be like the next one or something like that.
Yeah, we had teased maybe like a Savage Land kind of
Oh yeah, yeah,
scenario, and I don't know, maybe that's still in that next box. Who knows? But I think we were pretty on with some of these. I didn't see well, that'll be in the next episode with Strife, but I didn't really see that one coming. I figured Miss Sinister would be the big bad of this one.
the big bad. Yeah, yeah, yeah. But
But that is not what we're here to talk about tonight. We are going to break this up into a two-parter. We're going to talk about the villains, and we're going to start out with the first three scenarios that were revealed. It was kind of interesting that they did reveal all of them right away. I know,
yeah,
and
they did. They've like you're about to say they've hidden some in the past, but this they just kind of went all out on this one.
yeah, I think they maybe felt like they owed the community a little bit. It'd been a long time, so they just let it all out, kind of fill up everybody's canteen for a little bit and kind of bide some time till the next release.
Yeah, yeah, that very well could be. I mean, they didn't give us like a ton of stuff on some of the later villains, but definitely definitely giving us as much as they can because where it's going to be a little dry for a bit.
Yeah, yeah, I would hopefully they'll have a another news release maybe in the summertime.
I could see at least one in there, but
I
you never
figured
know.
I figured they're gonna have like two, like 1 month apart, because that's kind of what they did with, since the two heroes typically release together, they'll probably do the reveals a little closer together. And then, man, like this box, you gotta wait forever to to get to the hero packs. Because
Uh,
this box is still, as of recording of this, 3, 4 months away. So
yeah, yeah.
we,
It's gonna be a very long year for this game. I feel like there's just not gonna be as much as in the past coming out. Um, but I mean, we're gonna get a decent amount of content. So it's always nice to see a big box. And we got Mojo. Wait, did Mojo come out this year?
came out late last year. We did
Late
kind of
last
get
year.
spoiled with three products on a single month last year, at the end of last
Yeah,
year. So
I think I'm still waiting uh through all these releases because there's so many that came out at once, and so that's the one thing I have noticed is when you have a bunch come out at once, it just takes a while to get through it.
yeah, this is because we still have we played all the X-Men. We did this cool Mojo campaign where we kind of referenced the 90s cartoon episode with Mojo, where each of the heroes kind of went on their own little adventure and got sucked into their own little adventure. And we played different heroes as we went through each of the scenarios, which was kind of fun.
Yeah, that was your idea, and I agree. I thought it was pretty fun to kind of randomly select one of the X-Men and make some adjustments. We'll have to talk about it on a future
Yeah,
episode
yeah.
on that.
we'll go into more detail on some of our house ruling on a couple of the scenarios and how we like to kind of spice things up a little bit.
Yeah, yeah. But I have to say, the main reason why we're talking about this new box. So, what is your first impression when you saw the article?
Um, you see I mean, for me personally, I'd rather look at the heroes first. Those kind of get me excited about what's coming up with the game. But we're talking about villains today, and I liked seeing Juggernaut. I think he's gonna hopefully be uh, kind of a unique. We have like a Rhino where it's you think he's this big bruiser and all he does is attack. I'm hoping they can add a little bit of variety with just being able to hit hard, add some complexity to how to defeat him, and we'll get into that a little bit.
Like a Rhino point two. But yeah, you're right. We'll get into that. We can't just jump around here. We got to start from the beginning.
I also think they're doing a lot of different things, and I think having a different designer on, hopefully we'll start to see, some new stuff we haven't seen. So, what about you? What are some of your first thoughts?
Great question. So I'm kind of like you. I generally like looking at the heroes and seeing what type of differences and uniqueness of them. But coming from the background of playing like the Lord of the Rings, living card game or Arkham Horror, I kind of like the story elements. So I do like seeing these campaign boxes and seeing how they try to connect and make a story. I really enjoyed that campaign. So like Sinister Motives, I thought was pretty good. I liked how the campaign style went. And the story overall I felt was pretty good. That kind of fit with the villains. So I'll have to say my initial impression, I think the first two scenarios are very linked together, which I think will be good for like a story wise. I'm not sure how the third villain Juggernaut's gonna handle in the story, but of course Sinister following up would be the story, and then I guess Strife will make sense with Cable coming out as a hero. So I'm curious to see how the story plays in and how that connects with all these villains.
Yeah, I think they took a lot of inspiration. There's a comic storyline kind of follows this Hope Summers kind of when she gets introduced in the comics. So I think they drew a lot of inspiration from those comics. So
Yeah, for sure, for sure.
all right,
So
well, let's jump into our first scenario. The first scenario of this new expansion is called Morlock Siege, and it's going to be, I mean, for what I can tell, that multi-villain scenario that we've seen in previous boxes. Um, how do you think they're gonna get it right this time?
see, I think a lot of people have that feeling like with the Wrecking Crew. People I think were really excited, including me, about the Wrecking Crew, multiple villains, how they play off each other, and I know a lot of people they don't like it as much because I guess they game the game and find like the loopholes in it. I still enjoy Wrecking Crew for what it is. But then we had this same thought with Sinister Motives. Okay, this is going to be the multi villain that's going to actually work that Wrecking Crew was supposed to be. But um, it it was okay. I mean, I thought it had some good elements to it, and then we got another one, Brotherhood. All right, maybe this is the one that's going to be just right. And um, personally, I didn't like Brotherhood. I thought there was some things they could have done better on that one. Like one of our little things that we like to do is instead of when you defeat the villain, you just change the villain. We also change the side scheme because we like going to those different places fighting these villains.
Yeah, I think the little bit of with that one and kind of modifying it just kind of with thematically, you're kind of going in different places and fighting throughout the X Mansion, and it kind of varied the game up a little bit because it changed whatever that benefit or disadvantage that
Yeah,
main scheme was giving to you.
yeah. So I'm curious how this one's gonna go because it's not multiple at once like Sinister and Wrecking Crew, but more along the lines of Brotherhood where you're fighting one at a time. Um, but there's seven of them. Let me see if I'm counting right. Yeah, four, five, six, seven. Yep, seven of these Marauders. So there's a lot of possibilities, which I think that's also kind of nice. There there's a lot of variety in this scenario when it comes to who you're facing as the villain.
Yeah, I do think that it will help with a little bit of like replayability with this. Like
Hmm.
you're gonna potentially have seven different types of games you can play, or multiple combinations of, are you getting punished physically by having to defend large attacks, or are you getting, stomped with the villain scheming out super quick? Or do you have that villain that just whatever their forced interrupt is just like the worst, especially for whoever your character might be?
Oh yeah, for sure. Like for example, you've got let's see, we'll do Chimera. So Chimera's force interrupt when she attacks is you or an ally you control choose. You have to either spend the science resource or she's going to get plus two attack. And it seems like most of them have this like plus two attack or something else. Um, so like Chimera, you may have that resource or you may not, so you may have to deal with that. Another one has like confuse a character or stun a character, so those can really stink. So there's a little bit differences with each one. One thing I noticed though when I was looking through the cards is that they're all attack based and there's no scheme based special ability, um, which I thought was a little odd. I was expecting at least, there's the thwart one and the attack one and then other type of villains. But for some reason there wasn't any when it schemes do this out of any of the Marauders.
Yeah, it does seem because if you look at the main scheme, so it is has a threshold of 8 per player. And it's looks like it's a one stage. So if the stage is complete, or if there are no more like allies, which we'll get into that more like allies kind of component,
Hmm.
the players lose the
Yeah.
game. So it's not like crazy big. I mean, but it's not also very small. But if you look at the standard version of most of these, they're either skimming for one, and you got a couple that are two, and a few that are zero. So it does seem like you can almost flip down and kind of breathe for a turn.
Yeah, and maybe it's designed that way just to give you that breather. Um, but yeah, I thought it was very interesting. But speaking of that, how the attack versus scheme, you have like Vertigo, who's got two schemes. She's the schemer, but she's got zero attack, but she stuns the character, or you can give her plus two, or she stuns a character. So that's pretty nasty and no fun. But it doesn't look like you're gonna lose a lot of health that way, especially if you have a hero that can easily deal with stun, or if they have steady on them.
Yeah, there's also I think depending on what character you're playing, you may just say, yeah, let's confuse me if I'm someone that can get stalwart real easy, or um there's one who is a blockbuster. It's like give him a tough status card.
Yeah,
Sure, do that, but I've got Wolverine that can just pierce everything,
yeah,
you know.
yeah. So there's definitely gonna be, and that's why you're gonna play this scenario, and then there's gonna be times where it's gonna be like, oh, perfect, I've got the right one, and I can just mess with them, versus like, oh no, I got this one.
Right. It's like, oh, this is gonna be a long game.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, we're all gonna dread when we get the infamous harpoon.
Harpoon.
I mean,
Yeah.
did he show up to the Marauders club and was like, "Hey, my name's Steve. I've got this harpoon," and someone in the background is like, "So what's your name, Harpoon?" I mean,
But seriously, like
Marvel naming at its finest.
did he just like show up to like the super villain convention and they're like, "Hey, what's your power?" And he's like, "I got this cool harpoon gun."
I shoot people in the eye with this harpoon.
Uh, I bet there's people out there like, he's actually kind of the coolest villain ever. So,
Oh, oh yeah. Sorry, I'm not making fun of him. I'm showing my support.
yeah, but there's a variety. I mean, seven, and it looks like they're all kind of unique in their powers and kind of thematically how they're making them confuse or stun toughs. So,
Yeah, yeah.
um,
Kind of like your average villain stats for like a stage one. And I'm sure because they're an A side and then the back side is going to be B, which is going to be for like expert.
right,
So those stats are naturally generally get like a +1 for both scheme and attack. So there'll be a challenge in expert, but it'll be interesting to see how it interacts because, as you mentioned earlier, it's not this scenario is not about just beating up the villains, which I mean ultimately it is because that's the goal of Marvel Champions.
right. But
Um,
before you get to that one, I know where you're going. The health is pretty low for a villain. You're looking at most of them are averaging between like 9 and 10 per player. So they're not super bulky and beefy.
Gotcha. Yeah, and I guess that's probably the victory condition of you're wanting to take out three of them to win instead of the traditional one stage one, stage two, so two. Um, so there's that extra, almost like an extra villain you've got to
Yeah.
get through, an extra stage.
Yeah. Because on that main scheme, the Mutant Massacre, it says if there are three villains under routed, and we'll talk about routed in a second, the players win the game. So I do like that it's adding a lot of win condition, like a different win condition, and there is a different loss condition here as well with the Morlock allies. If there's none in play, you lose the game. So there's a lot of ways to lose. Three ways to lose in this version of the game. And
Yeah, yeah. That it kind of has because you have to. So I guess like the story element is these marauders are attacking the Morlocks, and you're trying to protect the Morlocks, from what we understand. And um, the Morlocks are, I guess, allies you get throughout the scenario. They've got a lot of health, but they're going to be the target of the attacks. Um, it looks like.
yeah, so let's talk about one of the Morlocks. So Morlocks is it's a basic ally. It's in this Morlock siege scenario. It's got one thwart, one attack with 5 health, and the big thing about it is it has a forced interrupt. It says when an enemy attacks you, it attacks a Morlock you control instead.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. That it has a lot of Senator Kelly vibes from uh, Genesis.
Yeah, from the Sabretooth scenario.
Yeah, and I'll have to confess, I'm not a big fan of the Sabretooth scenario. I'll have to say, I like the idea behind it. I don't like the idea of Sabretooth and him
This,
constantly healing.
yeah,
It's so frustrating. I think that is something that could have been fixed to be a little more balanced. So
yeah. I think this will protection players will benefit a little bit from these because you can just defend, hopefully play the right series of cards to ready a little easier and not have to either. I assume you can chump block with another ally, or you're gonna always have to be defending with your hero.
yeah, yeah, potentially. See, when an enemy attacks you, it attacks a Morlock you control instead. So the target of the attack is
The more
the ally.
right,
So,
you just
so it's one of
make
those
somebody.
rules one.
Yeah. Let's see. What was the other thing that's in this one? Oh, we do have a environment that comes out, and It says force response. After the villain is defeated, put it under here, and discard each minion that shares the title with the top villain of the villain deck. That villain is in play. The villain activates against each player in player order. So that is interesting. They'll get an extra activation after you
Yeah,
defeat a villain. So
and this one definitely kind of gives us there's a Marauder encounter set that's going to be full of minion versions of them.
yeah, that's what it makes it sound like. Is you're gonna have the 7 villains, but only one coming out at a time. But then you'll have a corresponding Marauder minion, each of the 7 that'll be um, potentially coming out and being minions and helping out the Marauder team.
Yeah, yeah.
But we
So
don't see any of those minion cards. That's just our educated guess.
yeah, so that's the basis of the scenario. There are cards within the scenario that's designed to kind of like help you. Like there's a hide card where you're trying to hide the Morlocks and whatnot. But that's kind of the gist of the scenario. I think like I kind of mentioned, I think it's going to be a mash of Sabretooth plus Brotherhood. So both those scenarios I think are fine. I have my problems with them. So I'm curious to see if this one does it does it better
Kind of
than
fixes
those
some of
two.
those
Yeah.
dislikes a little bit. I think the last card that I'll talk about, well, there's two. I'll spend real short on this one. So there's a treachery that comes out that's a benefit to the players. It does surge, but when revealed, you can give one Morlock ally a tough status card, so they can take some punches right to the face. And you're not having to worry about defending for them for that round.
Yeah, that's like the one help card. There might be like two or three
A
copies
couple,
of that.
yeah. One of the attachments that can come out is called Push to the Limit. Get attached to whoever the villain is, but it gets better the deeper you are into the game.
Oh
So
yeah, yeah, yeah.
it says while there's exactly one villain under rooted, which is that environment where you put the defeated villains under. If there's one, you get the villain gains steady, and then if there's two, the villain gains stalwart. And then it's not too bad to get rid of hero action. The villain attacks you, and then you discard the card. So it's not awful, but it's attacking the Morlock technically. So this feels like they're trying to really go after the Morlocks as many times as they can to try and get you to lose the game.
Yeah, yeah. Because it sounds like there's going to be more than one Morlock. So they're trying to, unlike Senator Kelly, where there's only one, they
I
want to try to take one or two Morlocks out to put on the pressure.
Yeah, I assume you've got to have at least 4. If you're playing a 4-player game, you're gonna have potentially one in front of each player, maybe.
Yeah, maybe each one starts with one. That's very possible.
Yeah. And then if you're less than 4 players, maybe you start with one and the rest get shuffled into the deck or something. I don't know.
Yeah, it'll be curious to see how that plays out. So
All right. Well, we're gonna keep moving. We don't really have much on scenario 2. They just kind of shared a couple of the screenshots of what makes in addition. So this one is scenario 2 is on the run, and you are going to use, I think, that Marauders villain set again.
hmm
Um, but it's going to add in some extra cards and almost like an attachment where they are attachments to kind of change the scenario up. Because when you look at it, the on the run, the card count, it only goes up to 11. So that's not a lot of cards to be building a villain deck with. So do
yeah.
you
So it'll be interesting to see how they play it out. I think it's going to be interesting because they're using that same villain set. So either they had a good idea and they're like, we need to reuse these villains, or they're like, let's save on some of our creative ideas and just reuse, recycle.
Yeah. So this one we only got the attachment. It's called Hope's Captor, and it's a two-sided card. The first one you put on, it's a permanent attachment, and it just kind of makes whichever one of the seven villain that is picked, they're just kind of like the ultimate villain that you're attacking for this scenario. And once you defeat side one or side A, in this case with these Marauders, it's real interesting. They kind of figured out a way to make this attachment turn an A stage for the villain into almost like a stage two. The villain gets 6 hit points per player, and then they get +1 scheme and +1 attack on their base stats.
Yeah, they get that extra health bonus as well, um, which the confident side doesn't get, but the desperate side does. So it makes them not only stronger, but health wise, it takes a pretty big jump.
Yeah, because if you're looking at going from, we'll say 10 per player on the base card to 16, I mean that's a good little jump.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And I think that brings up the replayability of this scenario too, because if you're only getting one of those seven Marauders, I mean, there's seven different villains for this one scenario. So that really changes up the game. And it can, again, like we talked about in that first scenario, there are some of these villains that may be terrible for
Mhm.
some heroes. And to get one of those, depending on the hero, it would be a challenge, I'm sure.
Yeah. Let's see. So escaping with hope is the main scheme. So what kind of leads us to believe there's going to be a whole Marauder encounter set is it says each Marauder minion gains guard and steady. So it looks like they're getting in the way to try and protect whoever that main Marauder is that's trying to steal Hope Summers.
Yeah, yeah, that this scenario definitely, I would say, all but confirms that there's a Marauder encounter set that's just going to be the minion versions of each of these villains.
Right.
So, but this scenario, like it, as you've been kind of mentioning, it brings in Hope Summers, which is going to be the big story of this campaign. And she's got a little ally card, which is nice, but pretty basic ally. It's got that 3 health. But what makes her unique is that she basically copies your hero's thwart and attack, and so that will be interesting to for manipulation on some decks to have like that strong attack and being able to just like keep her alive and use her to like constantly be um just doing big damage because she has no consequential damage. So you can just use her over and over and over again for big damage.
Oh, I did not notice that. You are right on that one.
Yeah, it's weird. We don't see that very often, and so it's kind of like a weird blank.
It does. It looks like it looks wrong.
Yeah, yeah. So I could definitely see some people having fun manipulating with decks that do that. So you get your Hulk that gets plus attack and aggression, so it gets another +1 on attack and so on and so forth, and just trying to get them super strong stat wise, and then just use Hope Summers as your fist of death.
Yeah. So they I wish they would print this keyword on more cards. So Hope Summers, she has the setup.
Ah,
Why
yes.
can't we just print that onto like Wolverine's claws or Visions or all these
I,
characters that everybody goes crazy over that their cards are gonna get, Ultron droned at the start of the game. So that was
yes, the classic struggle on rules.
yeah.
I agree. I think that's the simple keyword that Hope has setup just kind of fixes a lot of these questions. So, but I mean, I could probably go on for another 20 minutes, or we have on our own gone on 20 plus minutes of talking about setup and some of the heroes and their setup cards and whatnot.
Right. It's this easy solution to this big problem that they were just like, yeah, just kind of do whatever. Just print off
Hmm.
one little word, but yeah. Let's see. The other thing with Hope Summers is she herself um has the potential to make the heroes lose. So on her card it says if Hope Summers leaves play, the players lose the game.
Yeah, there's that other lose condition, which is always fun.
Yeah, which, there could be some cards in there where the Marauders may be forced to attack her. I don't know. That's just speculation. Because since she's not having consequential damage, the only way you would be able to defeat her is if she took an attack for one of your heroes.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there's always random encounters that do random things. So yeah, I think there's going to be something that's going to be like Hope takes a damage, or an ally must take a damage. If not, do this kind of thing.
Yeah. The other cool thing about this is it's only a 2 card encounter set, and that's the big thing is it's an encounter set. So you could just toss this into any other game and you get an extra side scheme and an extra ally that starts in play and kind of make a game a little easier, really.
Yeah, it should be fun to throw that into other scenarios. So I'm glad they made into it an encounter set, um, so that you can play with it in fun scenarios and see what shenanigans players can get into. So yeah, I think this is a good place to wrap up this episode. Um, with these first 2 scenarios, same villains, but it'll be unique to see how these play out with the same villains to see if it gets stale or if it is pretty refreshing to for the differences on this one.
Yeah, these I'm interested to see how these are going to play because they've been totally different from what we've seen before. So I think these are going to be fun, different. Stereotypically, you think the first couple of scenarios of a box are those kind of easier ones that kind of whet your palate and get you kind of in the groove of the campaign. But I think this one's going to be a little different.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. I'm excited.
All right. We are going to wrap this episode up and we will have a part 2 with the other villains. And just remember that we want you to go from a chump to a champion.
Nice, love it.